Just a quick naming thing, FE build is our build tool. Just touched on FE code, which is our component naming system. And we've also got an FE PA, which just stands for pages. So I might refer to them in my talk, or you'll see them on the screen. At Domain, we use an in-house tool, FE build. We use it to develop our React components. I'm going to walk through what it is, why we use it, and how it works. Quickly, I'm Jonathan Haynes. Most people call me Jono. You can find me Barry the Penguin, Twitter, and GitHub. This is attributed to Dan Abramov. There was a quote in a tweet I saw this morning. He retweeted that tweet, so I'm guessing he's endorsing the idea. I've heard from several people that they've consolidated their company's tool dependencies into a single package, and this worked really well for them. That's essentially what we've done with FE build at Domain. But why? Why did we choose to do that? Why would you choose to put all your dependencies, all your tooling dependencies, into a single tool? Opinions. Everyone has an opinion on how things should work. And FE build helps to enforce those opinions, enforce consistency across our code, while encouraging communication. That consistency is across teams. And as a result of having that consistency, our teams can communicate with one another. They can talk to each other about the same ideas, the same processes, the same methods, and everyone's on the same page. It also helps with making decisions, especially when you want to start a new project or a new component. Having all of this kind of tooling in one place, all these decisions already made for you, allows you to start really quickly and probably even cures JavaScript fatigue a little bit. The other thing is the people who build the tooling. So I work on FE build, not full time, but a lot of the time, alongside my project work. So having people dedicated to working on it allows us to add new features, not just remove unused features, but deprecate them. So we have a deprecation process for unused features or stuff that doesn't get used often. We're also able to focus on things like developer experience, so whether it's error handling or like fixing those little issues nobody wants to touch. You know, those ones you want to run that command in your project, only works on a Tuesday, or if you're facing the right direction. End-to-end tests can be like that sometimes. It just means that we can free up people to work on those features or that tooling, because we need to free up our teams to ship features, not get stuck building and fixing their tools. That's meant to be small. That's like a script section from an NPM package that we've got at Domain. Not that it's bad, like having a big NPM script section like that, but you can see there's a lot going on. It's difficult to understand, especially for someone new to the project. It's like, where do I start? These are some tools that we incorporate in FE build. You're probably familiar with a few of them. I'm not going to run through them or anything, but we'll touch on a couple of them. The point is that developers using FE build don't need to know about all these tools, don't need to know that they all exist. And where they do need to know about the tools, we document what they need to know and when they need to use those tools. The end result is a lot of our script sections in our components look like this. So we've got things like a watch task, a build task, test, lint. There's a few more than that that I'll cover later, but that's essentially what you need to use day to day. And again, build, lint, test, publish, and report. The first one I'll focus on is build. FE build, there's two build tasks. One is our watch task. It compiles our JavaScript, our CSS, and plays around with our assets, so our static assets. it includes things like a demo environment. We have something similar to, what's it called? Forget, blank. Storybook. Yeah, so before we knew about Storybook, we built our own demo environment. It's quite similar to Storybook, it has similar features and that kind of stuff. Another benefit of it is able to simulate the real world, so we're able to provide examples of how components will work in the wild through test fixtures and those kinds of things. And our watch task also, you're able to develop locally and see those changes reflected in your browser relatively quickly. Our other build task is just build, and this is kind of the step that we run pre-publish before it goes up to NPM. So it bundles and babels our JavaScript, copies our CSS, or our Sass and static assets into a lib folder ready to be published to NPM. One of those steps is Babel. So we use Babel, and you can see some of the Babel configs that we use. All of these configs that you need to know about or understand, these are all included in a single FE build Babel config. So the developers day-to-day don't need to know what configs or why we're using those configs. They just need to know how to use our FE build config. The aim of this is to, I guess, just make it easier day-to-day for developers to get on with their job. And the other thing I touched on before is FECO component, our demo component. I have a quick demo of it. What have we got? Close that. So I've got FECO button. I've already checked out and pulled the latest version of our code. I've already run yarn install, and we can run yarn watch, which will run FE build watch. So you can see it's run FE build watch. And it takes a second. This is our demo environment that we build components in day-to-day. So you can see there we've got fixtures down the left-hand side here. We've got different variations of our buttons. So we've got buttons with icons, like Jess touched on. We've got highlight buttons, lowlight buttons. We've also got, in here we've got radio buttons and button groups. And going back to our themes, we've got all homes. So the all homes primary button is blue. My desktop is blue as well. CRE is orange. Yep. So not just buttons, but all of our other components are able to run in our demo environment. And that's what a developer will see day to day when they're running a FE build. I'll just run another example of a more complicated component, if it works. So you can see the deprecation warning there. I don't know if you spotted it. This is a bit of a larger component. This is a calculator that I've been working on recently. More complicated, there's more variants. So you can see the slightly squished variants, or there's like one that'll fit in a gutter in your page, so like down one side of the column or something like that. So this allows us to try these components out before they make it into the wild, and try out all the different variants that we've created. We built this for domain, and All Homes also is able to put it on their listing pages as well. And all they need to do is change the theme, and it fits in with their page style. So that's a demo. Next command we'll talk about is linting. Just a couple of questions. Why lint? Some colleagues at work why they think we use linting. And some of their answers were consistency. So we get consistency across our code base. Reduce developer error. So to get rid of all those weird and silly errors that we make every day. And again, to enforce opinions. On those opinions, getting opinions can be difficult. Different people have different opinions. Coming to a consensus can be difficult. And we discovered that sometimes it's easier just to let other people make those decisions for you. So one of the things we do is use the Airbnb lint config that they've got. So they've got an ESLint config. We use a couple other bits and pieces as well, but all of the decisions there are already made for us. The other thing that we're introducing in the next version of FE Build, which is going to be version 13, just to give you an idea of how many iterations we've been through, we're going to introduce Prettier. Prettier is another code formatting tool which has a lot of opinions. You can't change those opinions, and again, it's just letting the tools do the work for us while relieving us a lot of decisions that we have to make. On the, gosh, you can't see that at all. That's okay. That's a very small part of the Airbnb ESLint config. There's a zoomed in section of it, and there's just a bunch of decisions there I don't need to know or need to worry about. Especially when I'm creating 380 odd packages, we don't have to want to make these decisions over and over again. So it's a lot easier just to bundle all these things up into a single ESLint config for domain. And that one there is specifically the browser config. So that includes our React linting rules and accessibility and those kinds of things as well. And that's all a developer needs to understand day to day, is just what the configuration looks like. And again, there's what our config includes. You've got Airbnb in there, Prettier, some Flow and React stuff as well, and that's all our linting rules. Another one is linting for our markdown using remark. Some cool things it does is not just lint our documentation, but if we need to, we can generate a table of contents. And another thing it does is validates links between different documents. So if you move a file around, it can tell you if your link still points to a valid file, which is useful when you're reading it on GitHub. Next command is test. The big one is simply FE build test. This is a single command that we can run in CI. It runs all our tests, so that includes linting, our unit tests, also reports on coverage for us as well. Also checks flow if we're using it for any flow errors. The other thing FE build provides that you'd have to set up otherwise if we didn't have FE build is our test environment. So we use Mocha and Chai, and here we've got some tests set up for setting up a JS DOM for Enzyme, and some polyfills for that browser environment that we'd be using in Node, and that's something that FE build provides out of the box as well. So day to day, you don't need to know that happens. You just rely on the fact that Enzyme is available. A JS DOM's already created for you, babel's registered, all those kinds of things. And the other half is setting up a bunch of globals, including React, Enzyme, Chai, all our Chai assertions as well. And we document all these decisions, and so this is all available for developers to read in our documentation as well. So there's no additional setup required from the developer. They can just create a test file, run FE build test, and start writing tests. Another test command is tdd, does the same thing, runs that test setup that we just walked through, gives us instant feedback, and as the command line says, tdd, test-driven development. Different people use that in different ways, but it's something useful, especially the quick feedback part when you're running tests. The last part of the testing part is code coverage. FE build coverage generates a coverage report after running the tests. It uses NYC, and there's also a babel config to go along with it. Again, all things that developers don't need to know about day to day, but something that allows everyone to get their job done. Generates a report and opens in the browser and those kinds of things. It shows how many lines of test coverage you have. Next one is publish. So we don't actually have any publish commands in FE build. I'd say that our publishing process, like say publishing NPM, isn't that complicated. So we haven't had a need to put it into FE build yet, but I'll still run through the tools that we use and what our publishing process looks like. We use a tool called NP. I'm not going to say his name, but it's available on that GitHub link down the bottom. It's a very useful tool. It runs a bunch of checks for us before we publish a package to NPM. Some of those processes include running our tests using npm test, running a version and publish command as well. One of the things that we do in every component is keep a changelog, and this is important for our next command. Each each component that we write keeps a changelog, and that contains all our notable changes for each version that we release of a component. And that changelog is handwritten. We don't rely on like git commit messages or anything like that. So it's fairly manual, but there is a few steps that we can automate, and we automate those steps with our FE build changelog command. It versions the changelog, so it rearranges the changelog entries for each version. It verifies that you've actually entered a changelog entry, and then adds a couple of links. I'm just wondering if I can show an example of it. So this is just keep a changelog, which we based the idea on. You can see it's got an unreleased section. You add your changelog under the unreleased section, and then everything below that is automated. The version number is added automatically for us on publish, the same with the date, and it rearranges any of the changelog sections that have been added since the last version. It's just a simple automated process that we've come up with. So again, developers don't need to know what order they need to make their changelog in. They just run the tool and it does all that for them. The last command, I think, is our reporting. One of the big, some of the big things that we're starting to run into recently have been bundle sizes. So the amount of JavaScript that we're sending down to the client, not getting out of hand, but we just want to keep a check on that. And some of those tools are Disk, Hugh Kennedy, the GitHub link down the bottom. It analyzes our browserify bundles and gives us an idea of how large those bundles are and how many files and what files are included in those bundles, and gives you a nice fancy report. And it's like all animated and nice. And another one is specifically reporting the bundle size. This is reported to all of our pull requests. So each component, each change that we make to our component in a pull request, the bundle size of that component is reported to GitHub from CI. It also produces a warning for developers when the bundle size exceeds a threshold that we've set previously. And we took a lot of that inspiration from the bundle size tool there. Got the link below. The end result is on GitHub. Down where you normally see your CI pass or fail check coming through. We also get 2 FE build checks in there as well. One reporting on the bundle size, and the other one doing that changelog verification that we talked about earlier. And again, that's just all feedback to developers that we can get to them quickly, so people can move on with their jobs. The last command that I'll talk about is one that we just introduced recently. It's just to analyzes our dependencies and lets us know if we've got any unused dependencies installed. That particularly helps in like situations where we've got a mono repo, where when you install your packages for a mono repo, it's going to install for each and every package in it. So if there's any unused dependencies in there, that helps speed up the installation process. Particularly helpful for CI as well, where we don't want to be installing dependencies over and over and over again. I'll just comment on some of the difficulties we have with a single build tool, some of the sharp edges. Dependency management. You saw on the slide I had with all the different tools that we have, managing those dependencies can be a little bit of a pain. Our current beta version that we're trying to release at the moment has a lot of breaking changes in it for developers. But the benefit of managing them all at once is that we can document what breaking changes are included in a new release. We can point people to the relevant documentation in each tool. So Enzyme released a breaking change recently with how to set Enzyme up. So there's new adapters for different versions of React, and but we can point people to that information through FE build, and we can bundle all those changes up into a single package. So the end result is it will take time for individuals and for teams to update their packages to the new tooling, but we're trying to smooth that transition as easily as possible. Another thing that is difficult, adding new features. Again, got the consensus, getting consensus between different individuals, different teams. Just a lot to consider, a lot to discuss, and sometimes resolving those discussions can take a long time. So all things to think about when you're thinking about putting together a tool like this for your company. What's next for FE build? It's pretty much feature complete, except for the backlog. But just a couple of things. On the fixtures that we have in the demo, that's just all static information that developers have to put in themselves. One of the things we'd like to do is have an API server in FE build. So if you had, say, like some Swagger docs or some flow types, you could use those to generate a server which can respond to requests with fake data. So if you have a component that makes a request to a backend that isn't built yet, you have something in FE build that allows you to send requests to something, so you can get up and running with your component. Another thing is we want to look at integrating some error reporting, so whether it's like Raygun or something else that captures day-to-day errors that developers bump into, it would be good for us to be collecting that information, looking at it, seeing if there's anything that we can fix, improve on, or provide better information when crashes do happen, because sometimes everything doesn't go to plan. And the other two things we're looking at, just touched on earlier, CSS and JS. That's another discussion that we're having at the moment, and Webpack as well. So how do we integrate those into our tooling? that's it for FE Build. So if you have any questions, I can try and answer them.